Plotinus First Ennead, First Tractate, The Animate and the Man. Introduction, The Duality of Man and the Seat of Affection. In the opening tractate of the Six Enneads, Plotinus embarks on a metaphysical inquiry into the nature of human experience, particularly regarding sensation, desire, reason, and the relationship between soul and body. The Animate and the Man does not merely concern itself with physiological or psychological explanations but dives into a deeper, ontological structure of being, exploring the constituents of the human composite and the metaphysical seat of emotions and actions. The soul, for Plotinus, is not a simple psychic force but a complex, layered entity which may or may not be entirely involved in the tumult of human experiences. The problem of where affections reside. Plotinus begins by asking, where do passions such as pleasure, pain, fear, and desire originate? He offers three possibilities: 1. The soul alone, 2. The soul using the body, or 3. A third principle formed from the union of soul and body, a couplement, as he calls it. This third possibility is particularly rich, since it introduces a metaphysical hybrid, a being that is neither pure soul nor mere body but a fusion that creates a distinct ontological condition, that animate. Plotinus' method here is diagnostic and disjunctive. He takes care to systematically analyze the possible loci of human experience and to distinguish the passions of the body from the activity of the soul proper. In this, he mirrors Platonic reasoning: the soul is essentially divine, rational, and impassive, must be insulated from the distortions of the corporeal. 2. The soul's immunity to passion. A central thesis of this tractate is that the true soul, the higher, undivided soul, cannot be the seat of fear, desire, or pleasure. Why? Because to suffer passion is to admit change, and the divine is unchangeable. For Plotinus, the soul, considered in its essence, not its image in matter, is not a composite and thus not receptive of alien qualities. It emanates its presence, like light from the sun, but does not mix with what it illumines. This leads to a remarkable metaphysical delineation. When we say, I feel pain, it is not the soul in its pure state that feels pain, but the couplement, the psychophysical unity that exists temporarily for the purposes of bodily life. The true soul remains apart, immutable, akin to a pilot steering a ship but untouched by the wind and tide. 3. The couplement, bridge between the sensible and the intelligible. Plotinus introduces the animate as the true locus of passion and sensation, a middle being formed by the projection of the soul into matter. This being is not the soul itself, but a sort of energetic residue, a reflected image or manifestation of the soul's presence. Think of it as the ray that extends from the sun into the world. The sun does not move, but the ray interacts with the world of matter. In this way, the animate becomes the dwelling place of sense perception, desire, and the passions. And yet, the soul is not unaware. It perceives these impressions not directly but by their traces as imprints left upon the couplement. This formulation is deeply Platonic and Neoplatonic. The soul remains above, the body below, and the human life is the tension between these two poles mediated by the mixed life of the couplement. 4. Reason, sensation, and the true self. Plotinus further explores the process by which reason and sense impressions interact. Discursive reasoning and sense knowledge, he argues, do not belong to the true soul, but to the soul in its embodied state, a faculty that perceives through impressions and images rather than the forms themselves. The true soul, capable of intellect direct apprehension of the forms, remains a stranger to this lower cognitive process, unless it deliberately engages. Here we find the distinction between ours and we. Before we awaken to intellect, we are living as the couplement, sense-driven, reactive, and bound. When we turn inward and upward, toward the realm of intellect, nous, we become truly ourselves, the we that governs and judges the lower faculties. This metaphysical elevation constitutes the true human being. The soul's relationship to the intellectual principle, nous. Plotinus next establishes a triadic structure: 1. The body, 2. The soul, and 3. The intellectual principle. The soul is a bridge between the bodily world and the divine intellect, and it participates in both. It is, the third, after the one and the nous, but capable of looking both upward and downward. The soul, in its higher function, partakes of nous not just in theory, but in an ontological participation that makes man a reflection of the divine order. This is the metaphysical root of human dignity and potential, the nous-like soul that can, by discipline and purification, remember its divine origin. 6. Sin, evil, and the multiplicity of the self. An essential ethical point arises from this ontology. If the soul itself is impassive and divine, how can it sin? Plotinus answers, it is not the soul itself but the composite being the couplement that acts badly. It is the lower faculties, mistaken for reason, that drag the being into error. When the soul consents to identify with this lower part, it acts wrongly not because its essence is changed, but because its vision has turned downward. Thus, for Plotinus, evil is not a substance but a misalignment. The cure is not punishment but recollection, the turning of the soul back to its source. 7. The descent and the expiation of the soul. In a poetic and mythological flourish, Plotinus invokes the descent of the soul as a kind of forgetting a glocose encrusted with the salt and shell of the sea. The soul, descending into matter, becomes overlaid with the accretions of bodily life. Expiation and purification are not a moralistic cleansing, but a metaphysical reorientation, to cast off the non-self and reawaken the divine image. Even the myth of Hercules who lives both on Olympus and in Hades is invoked as an allegory. The true self remains above, while an image endures below. This tension is the drama of the incarnate soul. The we, the true man, and the ascent to the divine. Plotinus' opening tractate is a profound meditation on identity, perception, and metaphysical anthropology. The soul is not to be confused with the man of passion and sensation. It is the divine principle within us, a stranger in the body, whose task is to remember itself and return to its source. The true we is not the passional being but the contemplative one. The work of philosophy is to awaken this inner divinity, to disentangle it from the couplement, and to ascend by intellection to the one from which all proceeds. Plotinus' First Ennead, Second Tractate, on Virtue. Introduction. The soul's escape and the nature of likeness. Plotinus begins this tractate with a stark and sobering premise: evil is here. It is embedded in the fabric of embodied life, a necessity of existence in the sensible realm. The soul, seeking to escape from evil, must ascend through a process of purification, ordering, and resemblance. The key concept introduced is likeness to God, homoiosis theoi, an ancient Platonic theme that Plotinus elevates into the cornerstone of ethical and spiritual transformation. But this likeness is achieved not through dogma or ritual, but through the cultivation of virtue, which itself is deeply stratified and exists on multiple levels. What unfolds in this tractate is a profound analysis of two kinds of virtue, the civic or political virtues, which govern the soul in the social and practical realm, and the higher contemplative virtues, which lead the soul into its divine likeness and reunite it with the intelligible realm. I. The question of divine likeness: what kind of being are we imitating? Virtue, Plotinus says, is the path to resemblance with the divine. But we must ask, which God are we trying to imitate? Not the passionate gods of Homer, nor even the rational soul of the cosmos, but that superpersonal principle that exists beyond all qualities, the one, or more immediately, the intellectual principle, nous. But can we say that this higher divine realm possesses the same kinds of virtues we do? Does the divine possess temperance, courage, or prudence? Plotinus argues, no. The divine intellect does not have virtue, it is beyond virtue. For it has no need of courage, there is no danger, nor temperance, there is no appetite, nor justice, there are no parts to regulate. Thus, the virtue that brings about likeness to the divine must be of a different order than the virtue that regulates civic life. This sets the stage for a distinction between the lower and higher virtues. 2. The lower virtues. Civic harmony and measured order. The civic virtues prudence, phronesis, temperance, sophrosyne, courage, andreia, and justice, dikaiosine, are practical and ethical qualities rooted in measured self-control, social propriety, and rational governance of the passions. They are necessary for the soul's first step away from chaos and disorder. These virtues, Plotinus explains, do not arise from the suppression of the passions alone, but from a harmonious ordering of the soul's faculties. Each part of the soul, the reasoning part, the spirited part, and the desiring part, must perform its proper function under the direction of reason. Justice is not merely a moral abstraction but a psychic state, the rule of the better over the lesser. However, these virtues, while noble, are still bound to the realm of becoming. They govern the soul's behavior in the world, its interaction with society and the body. They are not yet sufficient for true likeness to the divine. As Plotinus says, likeness is not achieved by civic virtue alone. 3. The higher virtues, purification and contemplation. To reach the divine, the soul must ascend beyond the ethical into the intellectual life, and this requires a higher kind of virtue, purificatory virtue. Here Plotinus is drawing from Plato's Phaedo, where philosophy is described as a preparation for death, the separation of the soul from the body. In Plotinus' Metaphysics, this separation is not a literal death but a metaphysical turning inward. The soul must no longer allow the passions of the body to define its reality. The higher virtues, then, are not about moderation or courage in the face of difficulty, but about liberation from the bodily condition entirely. Temperance becomes the soul's refusal to identify with bodily pleasure. Courage becomes the soul's fearless detachment from bodily death. Prudence becomes contemplation of intelligible realities, not calculation of means to ends. Justice becomes the alignment of the soul's inner gaze toward nous. These virtues are not merely preparatory, they are the beginning of the soul's return to its origin. 4. From purification to illumination, the birth of contemplative vision. The purified soul is not merely passive. It begins to see not with the senses, but with the eye of the intellect. Plotinus beautifully describes this process as one of inward illumination. The soul thrusts toward the light, and receives the imprint of the vision it perceives. What it always possessed, potentially the divine forms, now becomes active, operative, and formative. Thus, the purified soul becomes identified with its vision. Virtue here becomes not an ethical program but an ontological transformation. The soul comes to resemble what it sees, it becomes nous-like by contemplating nous. Virtue, then, is not a static possession, but a metaphysical becoming, a return to what one always was but had forgotten. V. Virtue as movement toward the good, life as participation. Plotinus subtly redefines virtue as participation in the forms of order, measure, and harmony. The civic virtues reflect these forms dimly, but the higher virtues approach them more directly. Yet even the highest virtues are not the good itself, they are mediations of it. The good, or the one, lies beyond being, beyond intellection. Therefore, even contemplative virtue is still on the way to something higher, to a state where all distinctions dissolve, and the soul is united with the source of all being in a mystical simplicity. The virtuous life, in this context, is not an end in itself but a ladder, a progressive alignment of the soul with more and more subtle ontological realities until it is able to rise beyond all virtue, beyond all activity, into stillness. 6. Two lives, the life of the citizen and the life of the god. Plotinus concludes by returning to a vital distinction. The life of the good man and the life of the god. The first is governed by civic virtue, law, duty, moderation. The second is governed by intellectual unity, by the soul's radical simplification and concentration upon its divine source. This is not to denigrate the lower virtues, but to relativize them. They are necessary in the soul's initial struggle, but ultimately they must be transcended. The man who lives by civic virtue is an image of virtue, the man who lives by contemplative union becomes an image of the divine. In the end, Plotinus urges us not to be satisfied with the image however noble but to ascend to the archetype, to the pure form of beauty and goodness that lies beyond all form. From ethical discipline to ontological ascent. In this tractate, Plotinus offers not merely a theory of virtue but a spiritual itinerary. Virtue begins as ethical discipline but becomes ontological purification, a path of return by which the soul is reunited with its divine origin. The goal is not simply moral uprightness, but divine resemblance, achieved through contemplation, purification, and ultimately, mystical union. Virtue in this Neoplatonic context is no longer merely a matter of social harmony or psychological well-being. It is a cosmic alignment, a harmonization of the soul with the eternal, the unchanging, and the true. Only when the soul has transcended both body and reason does it become truly itself, a divine being, gazing upon the good. Plotinus First Ennead, Third Tractate, on Dialectic, the Upward Way. Introduction, Philosophy as Ascent, Dialectic as Vehicle. From the outset, Plotinus frames the question not merely as an epistemological concern, what is dialectic, but as a mystagogical inquiry, what path leads us back to the divine? In this tractate, he defines dialectic as the supreme philosophical method, the very discipline by which the soul purifies itself, discerns the real from the illusory, and ascends through the layers of being. This is not dialectic as logic chopping or mere argumentation. Plotinus' dialectic is transformative, existential, and metaphysical. It is a way of life and a mode of spiritual vision that guides the soul upward from the world of multiplicity and shadows to the realm of unity and being. Three archetypes of the ascent: the musician, the lover, and the metaphysician. Plotinus offers three paradigmatic figures, each representing a type of soul predisposed to the upward journey. The musician, moved by beauty and harmony and sound. The lover, drawn passionately to visible beauty. The metaphysician, born for truth, reason, and the formless absolute. Each type begins in sensation, but through dialectic they may be led to contemplate higher realities. The musician, by feeling the resonance of harmony, is already attuned to the idea of cosmic order. But he must be guided to recognize that what moves him is not the sound, but the invisible form behind the sound, the rational structure of beauty. The lover, captivated by the beauty of bodies, must be shown that particular beauty is a manifestation of a universal form, that what he loves is the reflection of an intelligible reality, not its physical instance. The metaphysician is naturally philosophical. He is the one who has, as it were, already set foot in the higher realm and requires only a guide to reach the summit. Dialectic for him is not a preparation, but a consummation. Each of these types illustrates Plotinus' belief that philosophy begins in the senses, but must not end there. The task of dialectic is to turn the soul around, to reorient it from the phenomenal to the intelligible. 2. Dialectic defined, the method of true knowing. Dialectic, for Plotinus, is not merely a mode of speech or disputation. It is the method of the soul's ascent to truth. It proceeds by distinguishing essence from accident, identifying genera and species, clarifying the relation of things to being, establishing what is eternal and what is mutable, separating the real from the realm of opinion and appearance. It is an art of division and collection in the Platonic sense. It knows how to break concepts apart to their essences and how to reunite them under higher principles. Through this method, the soul is purged of opinion and error, and drawn into alignment with the structure of the intelligible cosmos. Plotinus' dialectic thus functions like a philosophical ladder, akin to the Symposium or Republic of Plato. It begins with particulars and ascends to universals, and from universals to the One. 3. Dialectic and the realm of the forms, the science of the real. When the dialectician turns his gaze from sense to thought, from opinion, doxa, to knowledge, episteme, he is able to dwell in what Plotinus calls the meadows of truth, an image taken from Plato's Phaedrus. These are not literal fields, but symbolic of the intelligible realm, the domain of the forms, ideas, and first principles. In this sphere, dialectic ceases to dispute and begins to contemplate. It contemplates not through mental juggling, but by a kind of intellectual vision, a direct and intuitive seeing of the eternal natures of things. In this way, it prepares the soul for that which lies beyond all forms, the One, which transcends even being. At this point, dialectic becomes silent. It moves from speech to vision, from argument to unity, from multiplicity to simplicity. Plotinus insists that at the highest level, dialectic leaves behind syllogisms, propositions, and premises, and enters into immediacy with the real. 4. Dialectic as the soul's proper activity. Plotinus makes a distinction between lower dialectic, which is occupied with disputation and logic, and true dialectic, which is the science of being. The former is technical and exterior, the latter is existential and interior. True dialectic is the soul's own act, it is not something imposed from without, but something the soul does by its own nature when rightly oriented. It is the activity of the intellective soul discerning, recollecting, and aligning itself with the eternal realities. This dialectic is purificatory, it cleanses the soul of error and prepares it for vision. But it is also hierarchical, it leads the soul up through the levels of reality, from the body and its images, to the soul and its rational faculties, to the intellectual principle, nous, and finally to the One. It is thus both ladder and light. V. Dialectic and the virtues, moral formation through intellectual ascent. Plotinus reminds us that dialectic is not isolated from the virtues. While civic virtue teaches discipline and order, and higher virtue prepares the soul for vision, dialectic is what completes the formation. It provides the soul with the structure of reality, teaching it how to discern, compare, and prioritize. In this way, dialectic is also ethical. It does not only inform the mind, it forms the soul. The soul becomes just, temperate, wise not by command, but by insight. Virtue becomes the natural result of seeing things rightly. Moreover, dialectic leads to contemplative wisdom, not just knowing about the good, but becoming like it. The soul that has undergone dialectical purification becomes transparent to the divine, capable of reflecting its order and unity. 6. The final vision, unity beyond being. Plotinus closes with a luminous insight: dialectic does not end in multiplicity, but in unity. After moving through divisions and distinctions, it must return like a circle to the One, the source of all thought and being. And here dialectic ceases to be discursive and becomes mystical. The highest act of dialectic is to know when to stop, to be still in the face of that which cannot be spoken, only contemplated. In this moment, the soul no longer seeks to grasp, define, or categorize. It simply abides in union, the goal of all Neoplatonic philosophy. Dialectic as a sacred ascent. In this tractate, Plotinus gives us the blueprint for the soul's return to the divine. Dialectic is not a method of debating others, but a means of transforming oneself. It is both a cognitive art and a spiritual exercise, the inner purification of the intellect so that it may behold the truth. From musicians and lovers to philosophers and sages, all souls that feel the pull of the beautiful are called to begin the dialectical ascent. Step by step, through inquiry, discrimination, and insight, the soul rises out of shadow and multiplicity toward the light of unity. And when it has reached the end of its journey, it finds that the final act is no longer thought but vision, no longer distinction but union, no longer dialectic but silence. Plotinus First Ennead, 4th Tractate, on True Happiness. Introduction. What does it mean to be happy? What is happiness? Plotinus begins by confronting this perennial question not from the perspective of the common man who sees happiness as pleasure, wealth, honor, or good fortune, but from the vantage of the philosopher who seeks the nature of the soul and its relation to the divine order. For Plotinus, happiness, eudaimonia, cannot be a product of chance or bodily circumstance. It must be rooted in what is essential and permanent in us, the soul, and not just any aspect of the soul, but the highest, most divine element. Thus, this tractate becomes not merely an ethical inquiry, but a metaphysical exploration of human nature, life, and the possibility of transcending the realm of change and misfortune. Can other living beings be happy? Plotinus begins with a provocative thought: if happiness is merely the fulfillment of natural function, then animals and even plants could be said to be happy. After all, they live in accord with their nature, and they flourish to the extent their biological needs are met. In this sense, life itself might be identified with happiness. If to live is to function according to one's nature, and one does so without hindrance, then perhaps all life is happiness. But Plotinus quickly pushes beyond this. Is life itself enough for happiness? Or is there a higher kind of life, a life that belongs not just to living things, but to beings who can reflect, contemplate, and ascend? Already we are being led toward a hierarchy of life, the vegetative, the sentient, the rational, and the divine. 2. The soul and the faculties of life. If the soul is the source of life, and happiness is a function of life, then happiness must be the flourishing of the soul. But not all parts of the soul are equal. The soul includes sensation, desire, discursive reason, and finally, intellect, nous. Plotinus makes clear that not all forms of life lead to happiness. Mere animation, the life of plants or animals, is not enough. Nor is a life of sensation, or even of cleverness in navigating worldly affairs. True happiness arises only when the soul is turned toward its source, living according to its highest principle, its kinship with the intellectual realm. This is why happiness is not found in pleasure, for pleasure belongs to the body. Nor is it in fame or power, which depend on external circumstances. True happiness is an inward possession, an activity of the soul in its most authentic, divine dimension. 3. Happiness and the life of reason. For Plotinus, the beginning of true happiness lies in rational life, not merely reasoning about practical things, but contemplating eternal truths. The life of philosophical contemplation aligns the soul with the higher reality, with nous, the divine intellect. Here Plotinus draws on Plato's conception of happiness as likeness to God. To be happy is to live like the gods, not by possessing what mortals value, but by being inwardly complete, self-sufficient, and immersed in the eternal. Reason, then, is not a tool for survival, it is the soul's path to its true self. By living according to reason, the soul disengages from the turbulence of the lower life passions, needs, ambitions, and rises into stillness and clarity, the life of the divine. 4. The stability of the happy life. A major test of any conception of happiness is whether it can be lost. If happiness is destroyed by illness, poverty, or bereavement, then it is no true happiness. Plotinus insists that real happiness is invulnerable. Once attained, it cannot be taken away, because it is rooted not in fortune but in being. The truly happy man is one whose center of identity lies not in the body or the emotions, but in the intellective soul. Whatever befalls him externally, the inner man remains serene, undisturbed. The wise soul regards even death of others or the self with philosophical equanimity, seeing it as a natural passage, not a tragedy. This recalls the Stoic idea of apatheia, but Plotinus' serenity is grounded not in indifference but in participation in a higher reality. The happy soul is like the sun, it may shine on fields of sorrow or joy, but its light is not diminished. Objections. Can pain or misfortune threaten happiness? Plotinus anticipates several objections. What about illness, pain, or grief? Can a man be happy while suffering? What about unconsciousness? Can a man be happy when he is unaware? What about public disgrace or personal loss? He answers that such things affect the lower part of man, the outer sheath, not the true man. The soul's essence is untouched. Even when asleep or unconscious, the soul is in possession of its being, like a lamp whose flame burns behind a veil. True happiness is not a feeling, but a mode of being. Just as the one is not changed by what proceeds from it, so the soul is not changed in its essence by what happens to the body. Misfortunes are not denied, but they belong to another level of existence. The sage knows what part of himself suffers and what part remains divine. 6. The life of the sage, union with the supreme. At the heart of Plotinus' view is a radical redefinition of what it means to be a person. The happy man is not the composite of body and soul. He is the intellective soul that knows itself as divine. His true life is not in time, but in eternity. This is why Plotinus speaks of happiness as a state of unity, not a progression. Once the soul has ascended, it dwells in the presence of the divine intellect, or, beyond even that, in the One, the source of all being. In this union, there is no desire, no lack, no striving. The soul becomes what it always was, a god. The virtues that once disciplined it now dissolve into a state of peace. There is no longer justice, temperance, or courage, for there is no multiplicity to regulate. There is only being in accordance with the good. 7. Happiness and the soul's eternity. Finally, Plotinus insists that true happiness is eternal because it participates in the eternal. The soul that has reached this state does not fear death, for death cannot affect what is unbodied and divine. Nor can time erode happiness, for it is not in time at all. The soul that lives in accord with its higher nature has everything it could ever desire, not because it possesses things, but because it has become what it truly is. It no longer seeks, it simply is. And in that being, it possesses the absolute fullness that is the definition of eudaimonia. Happiness as the fulfillment of the soul's divine nature. In this tractate, Plotinus elevates the notion of happiness from circumstantial satisfaction to ontological fulfillment. Happiness is not pleasure, nor is it success, nor is it even virtue in the moral sense. Happiness is the soul's return to itself, its reunion with the divine, its realization of its eternal identity beyond change, chance, and body. Plotinus challenges us to cease identifying with what suffers, and to awaken to what is immortal within. The happy man is not fortunate, but free. Not unaffected, but untouched in essence. His joy is not in things, but in being. And that being is the most stable, most luminous, and most real thing that is. Plotinus' First Ennead, 5th Tractate, Happiness and Extension of Time. Introduction, Time and the Question of Fulfillment. Having established in the preceding tractate that true happiness is a condition of the soul and its alignment with the divine, Plotinus now turns to a subtle question: does happiness require a span of time? Is a man happy because he lives happily over a long period, or can he be happy in a moment, in a single act of noetic fulfillment? This inquiry is not trivial. It cuts to the heart of classical eudaimonism and differentiates Neoplatonic philosophy from Aristotelian ethics. For Aristotle, happiness is found in a life well lived, in consistent activity in accordance with virtue over time. For Plotinus, happiness may transcend time itself, residing in a state of being rather than a sequence of acts. The problem, is happiness temporal or eternal? Plotinus asks, does happiness belong to a long life, or can it be present in an instant? Is a man only happy if his life, in its entirety, meets certain conditions, or can happiness reside in the soul regardless of time? To answer this, Plotinus first reaffirms that happiness is not in the body, nor in the sequence of events that happen to the embodied soul. If this were the case, the happy man would be vulnerable to time, to change, to misfortune, and ultimately to death. But such a man would not truly be happy, he would be dependent and insecure. Plotinus insists, true happiness belongs to what is eternal in us, the soul as it lives according to intellect, or nous. But this leads to an important distinction between two lives, the life in time, and the life above time. 2. The soul's double life, in time and beyond. The soul, as Plotinus repeatedly emphasizes, exists in two modes. The soul is engaged with the body, living a temporal, narrative life, growing, acting, suffering, changing. The soul is contemplative, turned inward and upward, aligned with the eternal intellect and participating in the timeless activity of knowing. The first life, rooted in time, is never complete, always vulnerable, and cannot hold happiness secure. The second life, intellectual, noetic, divine, is complete in itself, not bound to succession, and thus not dependent on a life's length or external stability. From this metaphysical distinction arises a decisive ethical insight: happiness is the soul's eternal activity, not its movement in time. 3. Happiness as the soul's essential act. Plotinus defines happiness not as a condition that accrues by process, but as the actualization of what the soul is when it functions according to its own proper nature. It is not something added, nor a result, nor the fruit of a process. It is the presence of the soul to itself in its highest form. When the soul is fully awake to the divine, it lives its truth, and this living is timeless. The soul does not need an extension of days to be happy, any more than fire needs a long time to be hot. Happiness is the act of being what one truly is. Just as Nous, the divine intellect, thinks all things in a single unified vision, so too does the soul become happy not in a stretch of experience, but in a state of unified presence. 4. Memory and duration, are they necessary? Plotinus then explores a subtle objection: perhaps we only know that someone is happy if they remain happy over time. Doesn't happiness require continuity, persistence, memory? He answers, such concerns belong to the lower life, the life that observes change, narrative, sequence. But the true soul, when it has risen to its higher state, lives entirely in the present. It is not fragmented across past and future. It is like Nous, eternal actuality, presence, wholeness. The happy man, then, is not he who recalls having once been happy, or who hopes to be happy again, but he who is happy now, not in clock time, but in ontological presence. Even if the happiness appears brief in the world of time, it is complete in itself. A soul that for a single moment is united with the divine intellect has known the fullness of the good. Time cannot diminish it. Is duration a sign of a deeper happiness? Plotinus concedes that a long life of contemplative unity may seem greater than a short one. But he insists that this is not because time adds anything to happiness. Rather, the longer duration simply reflects the soul's greater stability in the divine. In this sense, the extension of time shows, but does not cause, the depth of happiness. The sage who remains steadily in contemplation has not gained more happiness, he has simply remained in it longer. His eternity has penetrated time. This turns the classical idea of temporal happiness on its head. It is not the case that one builds happiness by living rightly across years. Rather, happiness is a singular act of unity with the divine, and time is merely the shadow of eternity, not its measure. 6. The eternal and the instant, mystical implications. At the mystical heart of this tractate is Plotinus' insight that happiness is timeless because it is divine. The soul becomes happy in the same way that it becomes divine by becoming what it truly is, and this realization transcends time, process, and sequence. In the moment of intellectation, the soul is no longer concerned with, was I happy yesterday, or, will I be happy tomorrow? It does not need to stretch its joy across a narrative. It is joy, the joy of being, the joy of union. Thus, Plotinus echoes and transcends the Stoics, Plato, and Aristotle. He affirms that happiness is not only the activity of reason, but the eternal actuality of the divine soul in us, beyond all stories, beyond all changes, beyond even all virtues. The soul's happiness is the soul's eternity. Plotinus' answer to whether happiness needs duration is unequivocal: no, happiness is an eternal act, not a temporal process. A moment of union with the divine intellect is worth more than a lifetime of pleasure, honor, or ethical striving. In this tractate, Plotinus frees happiness from the anxieties of time and grounds it in the ontological dignity of the soul. To be happy is not to possess things, or even to act nobly over a long life, but to be oneself fully in eternity, not in succession. The happy man is not one who counts his years, but one who dwells in the timeless joy of the good. For such a soul, the now is enough, and it is infinite. Plotinus' First Ennead, 6th Tractate, on Beauty. Introduction: Why Beauty Matters. Plotinus opens with a disarming yet profound question: what is it that makes us recognize beauty in things? Why are some things immediately arresting, stirring admiration, desire, or love, while others repel or bore? This inquiry is not mere aesthetic curiosity. For Plotinus, beauty is a metaphysical key, the soul's compass pointing toward its divine origin. Beauty is not only what pleases the senses, but what reveals the nature of reality itself. To love beauty rightly is to desire what is more real, more unified, more radiant. Thus, this tractate is a bridge, from sensation to intelligible vision, from body to soul, from form to the formless. Plotinus does not merely describe beauty, he invokes it, and through it, calls the soul upward. The common opinion and its limits: beauty as sensory. Plotinus begins with the ordinary view. That beauty is in colors, shapes, sounds, and the harmony of forms perceived by the senses. This is not entirely false, but superficial. He challenges the idea that beauty resides in symmetry alone. A mathematical arrangement may be balanced, but not necessarily beautiful. Likewise, not all symmetrical things are lovely, nor are all asymmetrical things ugly. Plotinus is already hinting, beauty is not in the elements, but in their form-giving principle in the presence of something higher shining through matter. What pleases is not merely structure, but the radiance of order, of meaning made visible. 2. What then is beauty? The presence of form. Here, Plotinus offers his core doctrine: beauty is the presence of form, eidos. A thing is beautiful because it participates in intelligible structure, in something higher than itself. When form, the rational principle, enters matter, it orders it, illuminates it, and raises it above chaos. The shapeless is ugly because it is formless, lacking unity, clarity, and meaning. But when form arrives, the thing becomes defined, coherent, and good, and thus, beautiful. Plotinus thus fuses beauty and goodness. What is beautiful is also good, because it reveals the presence of the intelligible. This Platonic insight becomes the foundation of Neoplatonic aesthetics: the more real, the more beautiful. 3. Beauty in the soul, the ascent from sensation. But Plotinus quickly leaves behind the physical realm. The true seat of beauty, he argues, is the soul. Physical beauty is only the first step in an ascent, the ladder that begins in the senses and climbs toward the intelligible world. When we experience beauty, we are moved not just by the thing seen, but by the recognition of form, something that resonates within the soul itself. Beauty speaks to the soul because the soul knows it already, having seen it in the divine realm before its descent. This experience, the sudden joy, admiration, longing, is a recollection. Beauty awakens the soul to itself, stirring a desire to return to the world it once knew, the world of nous, of ideas, of pure being. 4. The soul's purification, beauty as a guide to the divine. Plotinus declares that the soul becomes truly beautiful only by purifying itself, by casting away what is alien, the passions, the bodily desires, the mutable, and returning to its own essence. This purification is not moral in the modern sense. It is ontological. The soul must discard what does not belong to it, in order to shine with its own light. Beauty in the soul is not painted on, it is revealed by removal, like a sculptor releasing the form from the marble. Thus, the love of beauty becomes a path of self-transformation. The soul that pursues beauty rightly is led from sensual beauty, bodies, music, nature, to moral beauty, virtue, harmony of inner faculties, to intellectual beauty, the forms, and finally to the good, the one. This ascent mirrors the ladder of love in Plato's Symposium, but Plotinus radicalizes it. The goal is not merely contemplation of beauty, but identity with the good, the absolute source of all beauty and being. The nature of the one, beyond beauty yet its source. Plotinus confronts a paradox: the one, the source of all, is beyond form, beyond being, and thus beyond beauty as we normally understand it. And yet it is the origin of all beauty. How can something formless be the source of form? Because the one is not a thing, but pure actuality, pure unity. It is beautiful not by structure, but by overflowing fullness. It is that which needs nothing, contains all, and gives all. Thus, beauty points beyond itself. Every beautiful thing is a trace, a shadow, a symbol pointing the soul beyond itself to the invisible source that is more than beautiful, because it is the cause of all beauty. 6. The vision of the beautiful, a mystical climax. Plotinus ends with one of the most famous passages in all his writings, a description of the soul's final vision of beauty. It is not like seeing an object, but like becoming the vision itself. The soul, having shed all that is not its true nature, becomes light, becomes love, becomes beauty itself. Withdraw into yourself and look. And if you do not find yourself beautiful yet, act as does the creator of a statue. Cut away all that is excessive, straighten all that is crooked, bring light to all that is shadowed. Then when you see that you are become of such form as this, and have seen yourself wholly pure, then you may dare to look up and see the divine beauty. This is no metaphor. It is the metaphysical and mystical core of Plotinus' teaching. To see beauty is to become beautiful, and to become truly beautiful is to approach the divine. Beauty as the soul's compass and flame. In this dazzling tractate, Plotinus unveils beauty as both the first thing the soul loves and the last thing it becomes. Beauty is the visible face of the invisible world, the manifestation of form in matter, of intellect in soul, and of unity in multiplicity. Far from being a luxury of the senses or a delight for artists alone, beauty is for Plotinus the essence of spiritual life. It calls the soul out of exile. It teaches discernment. It awakens longing. And it leads the soul back to its source. To love beauty is to desire what is more real, more eternal, more divine. And to follow that desire with courage and purity is to undergo the soul's ultimate transformation, to pass from seeing beautiful things to becoming a mirror of beauty itself, and finally to rest in the ineffable One, where all things are at peace. Plotinus' First Ennead, 7th Tractate, on the Primal Good and the Other Goods. Introduction, the problem of the good. What is the good? Is it merely what we desire? Is it utility, pleasure, or virtue? Is it something within the world, or beyond it? These are perennial questions stretching from Plato's Republic to Aristotle's Ethics, and now, in Plotinus' thought, given a metaphysical and theological depth. In this final tractate of the First Ennead, Plotinus distinguishes the primal good from all lesser goods. He does not dismiss the value of things like health, wealth, friendship, or virtue, but he relativizes them. All such goods are derivative. They are good because they participate in the good, not because they are ultimate. The primal good, he says, is beyond being, beyond thought, beyond life. It is the source of all, and yet not definable by any category. And yet it is what all things seek. What is good for beings? Participation in the good. Plotinus opens with a principle derived from Plato: everything that exists, desires the good. The good is the goal of all striving, whether in plants reaching toward sunlight, animals pursuing nourishment, or human beings seeking fulfillment. But what is the nature of this good? It cannot be pleasure, since not all beings pursue pleasure. Nor can it be utility, which is always instrumental to something else. Nor even virtue, since virtue presupposes a standard by which it is judged. Thus, the true good must be something beyond all relative good, something that does not serve, but is served. It must be self-sufficient, final, and causally primary. This is the primal good. 2. The good as the source of all, above being and intellect. Plotinus then makes a radical metaphysical move: the primal good is not even being, but beyond being. This echoes Plato's assertion in Republic 6 that the good is beyond being in dignity and power. Why? Because being is already determinate, multiple, and intelligible. But the good is prior to all these. It is what gives rise to being, intellect, nous, soul, and the cosmos. It is not something known by reasoning, but something intimated through ascent and illumination. The good is thus not a thing, nor even a mind. It is pure unity, infinite fecundity, the absolute cause of everything that is. 3. The relation of the other goods, derivative and dependent. What then of the other goods, things like beauty, virtue, intelligence, order, and life? Plotinus teaches that these are traces or emanations of the good. They are good insofar as they participate in the primal source. But they are not the good itself. Even the divine intellect, the highest form of being and knowing, is less than the good, because it is already a duality, a knower and the known. The good, by contrast, is pure simplicity. It has no need to know, because it is beyond distinction. Yet it is the cause of all knowledge, all life, all being. Therefore, no finite good can satisfy the soul's deepest longing. Every relative good points beyond itself, toward the source. 4. The nature of soul's desire, toward the good, not just the beautiful. This insight helps resolve a subtle but crucial distinction in Plotinus' metaphysics. the soul's desire for beauty is ultimately a desire for the good. In Tractate 6, beauty was shown to be the form manifest, the soul's awakening to divine harmony. But now, Plotinus reveals that beauty is not the terminus, it is the signpost pointing to a still greater source. The soul that ascends through beauty is ultimately seeking the one, the good. This means that even in our experiences of joy, fulfillment, and love we are reaching beyond what we experience. The soul is homesick not for anything it sees, but for the invisible ground of all seeing. The good is not possessed, it possesses. Plotinus makes a powerful metaphysical claim: no one possesses the good, rather, the good possesses them. One cannot claim or contain the source of all. To have the good would be to limit it, to make it subordinate to the self. But the self is only what it is by the good's power. Thus, the true experience of the good is one of self-surrender. One does not master the good, one is transformed by it. It is the culmination of the soul's journey to release all claim to selfhood, all form, all thought, and enter into identity with unity. 6. Union with the good, beyond intellect, beyond experience. This union with the good, Plotinus insists, is not knowledge in the ordinary sense. It is not thought, nor vision, nor sensation. It is a state beyond duality, beyond subject and object. In this moment, the soul does not see the good, it becomes one with it. There is no distinction between seer and seen. This is the mystical climax of Plotinus metaphysics, the dissolution of all multiplicity in a simple, silent, ineffable union. And yet, this is not annihilation. It is fulfillment, the end of the soul's desire, the restoration of its true identity. For in touching the good, the soul returns to its source, and becomes what it always was in eternity. The primal good as the soul's final rest. With this final tractate of the First Ennead, Plotinus completes his architecture of ascent. From the body to the soul, from virtue to beauty, from happiness to eternity, and now to the primal good, the one that gives rise to all things yet remains beyond all. All goods we experience in life, virtue, beauty, pleasure, wisdom, are echoes. They awaken desire, but do not quench it. Only the good can do that. Not because it satisfies desire, but because it absorbs it, dissolving the soul into unity, beyond all lack. Thus, the good is not merely a concept or ideal. It is the foundation of being, the goal of desire, the end of philosophy, and the origin of all love. To ascend to it is the highest act. To dwell in it is true blessedness. And to become it insofar as the soul may is the final gift of the contemplative life.